Alright, so today we are testing the RX 7600 in Remnant II. I'll put up all the specs on the screen right now, but we're pairing it with a 12400F Intel CPU. The rest of the specs are there. You can pause if you want to see it. Now let's just go over the settings here quickly. Currently we're at 1080p. We've got, I'll just disable that. We're running on the Ultra preset and detailed shadows are enabled, and there's not a lot of settings here that you can actually change. And that's pretty much it, right? So our aim for this video is to try and get 60 frames per second continuously or constantly, and then we'll see how high we can actually push the frame rate. But my little testing that I've done so far with this GPU seems to indicate that it's performing quite well. I don't know if you remember, but Remnant 2 had a lot of backlash when it just launched because it actually had pretty poor performance, and the devs came out and said that they rely on upscaling. So I waited a little while to actually test this game. Just wanted to get a few patches out just to give it a fair chance. It is an Unreal Engine 5 game. It doesn't have Lumen though, so no software ray tracing. But the game looks okay. It's not groundbreaking when it comes to visuals, but it's good enough. It looks okay, and it does suffer from the usual Unreal Engine stuff, right? We do have some traversal stutters every now and again, some shader compilation stutters, especially on this machine. I tested it on the 12700K CPU, and it seemed to do much better there, and I think I'm going to die. This guy is pretty tough. I'm not the best at this game at all. I don't know when to dodge yet. I'm not that good at Souls games. But, oh, he's done. There we go. But you can see there's quite a bit of stuttering going on here. As I said, on the 12700K system with 32 gigabytes of DDR4 4000 megahertz memory or mega transfers per second, it did perform a lot better. You can see the 0.1% lows are quite low. But all in all, it's definitely not a bad experience on this 7600. Alright, so let's just see what happens once we start enabling upscaling here. So this game does support FSR and XeSS as well as DLSS, obviously not on this GPU, and it supports frame generation as well. But we'll just stick with the FSR set to quality. I did test XeSS as well, and the performance gains with FSR on this GPU in this game does seem to be a little bit better than with XeSS. So we're still on the Ultra preset, just now with FSR Quality. All right, let's just reset our numbers here. And, whoops. And you can see we actually got a very decent bump in the performance there. We went from 70 frames per second to just over 100 frames per second. So pretty much almost a high refresh rate experience here. If you've got a 144 Hz monitor, that'll definitely benefit from this. And the game still looks pretty good. I mean, I'm not a big fan of using FSR when it comes to 1080p resolutions or any upscaling for that matter. But in this game, it does seem to look quite okay. It does drop below 100 every now and again, but that's just how it goes. Right, so I'm not going to be testing too much. I'm not going to be wasting too much time with this setting here. I did test the option scanning as well, so going from ultra to medium basically nets you like 10% maybe, but dropping down to low, you actually get you get a nice performance bump. So it doesn't scale very well up until you actually go down to low. Right, so we'll not be testing the low preset at 1080p. These guys are somewhat annoying as well. So we won't be testing the low preset, but I just want to see if we actually just go down to medium, if we can get rid of some of this stuttering. Now the game does not pause when you go into the options menu, unfortunately. So hopefully we don't die. So just going to leave everything as is, and we'll just go down to medium. Let's see if we can actually get rid of some of these stuttering. As you can see, our frame rate didn't really go much higher, and I mean there's still some stuttering going on here. So traversal stutters and maybe some shadow compilation stutters that'll be a lot more noticeable when you start combat, etc. But as I said, that's just inherent to Unreal Engine. This is Unreal Engine 5. It seems to have the same issues that Unreal Engine 4 has. So that's just how it goes. Right, so this is definitely not a a bad experience. As I said, I think 1080p, even native on the Ultra preset, is fine for this GPU, but let's see what happens at 1440p. Right, we're now at 1440p, still on the Ultra preset, no upscalers being used here. Let me just get rid of that, and everything is still exactly the same, still with the detailed shadows. So I played around with this. The performance gains are very minimal with it enabled at these resolutions. Maybe we'll see a difference at 4K. We'll have to wait and see. But for now, let's test 1440p native here. Let's just refresh our numbers here. And maybe not as good as I was expecting. I was expecting a little bit higher, maybe 55 to 60 frames per second. But then again, this is pretty entry-level GPU. It's got only 8 gigabytes of VRAM. Not that we're running out of VRAM there. You can see we're only using around 5.5 gigabytes. I did see that even at 4K, we can run it on this GPU. It'll fit into the memory buffer and no problem whatsoever. So for those of you who aren't too sure what type of game this is actually a Souls-like. So just think Elden Ring with guns. Obviously, it's not a From Software game, but it is actually quite enjoyable. It's got a lot of the Souls elements, and adding guns to a Souls-like is quite fun, I must admit. We're not able to hit 60 frames per second yet, so let's just first change the presets, see if we can get closer to that 60 frames per second, and if not, we'll just play around a bit with the upscaling. Alright, so let's just try the medium preset now. At 1080p it really didn't make a difference, and you can see over here it's not making a difference either. Still hovering just below 50 frames per second. So scaling definitely not one of this game's strongest suits. So let's just go down to low, then we'll actually see a bit of a difference, but not much. Still not getting 60 frames per second, right? Although that was a pretty big stutter there. So it's just loading in the area. As soon as you move around a bit, it's okay. You can go back to the same area. It shouldn't do it again. But still, even on low, we're not getting 60 frames per second, right? So it seems like we'll have to use some upscaling here. But as you can see, the presets don't really scale that well. All right, so I think we are actually fine just on the Ultra preset here. Not that we're losing too much performance. So let's go on and enable FSR here. I think we should be okay with the balance, but let's start off with quality first, see if we can get 60 frames per second. Actually, that's pretty good. Quality gives us 70 frames per second, exactly what we wanted. The stuttering, let me just reset the numbers there, give it a fair chance here. The lows aren't that great. Once again, Unreal Engine is to blame for that. But this game's performance actually improved significantly since launch. Not exactly sure what they changed, if it's just optimization or if the visuals were actually reduced. I did not test the game at launch, so I can't comment on that. But the way it is now, it performs quite well, I think. Alright, that's it for FSR Quality. Let's just see. I'm willing to go down to balance the upscaling when it comes to 1440p. So let's see if we can hit that 100 frames per second again. So still the exact same settings, just FSR Balanced here. I think we should get close to 100, and I was lying. I keep on hitting escape. So we gained maybe 10 frames per second. So not worth it really to go down to balanced. Obviously, it depends on which area you're in. A lot of foliage will bring down the frame rate quite a lot. But it does seem to hold its own, right? It's definitely above 60 frames per second at all times here. Even with that big dip, actually brought our 0.1% loads down quite a lot. But still a pretty good experience this. I think you'd be better off just sticking to quality FSR, unless you really want a much higher frame rate. Maybe we can get that with performance. Let's just try performance first. So performance also, at this point we're not really gaining much. Let's just reset the numbers here. So we're not really gaining that much with additional upscaling or lowering the internal resolution further. It's hovering. I mean, we started off with around 70 frames per second. We're now at 85, so gaining somewhat, but not as much as what we did at 1080p. But once again, you can see it depends on which area you're in, and over here we're still getting almost 100 frames per second. So all in all, pretty good, I think. All right, so now let's test this at 4K. Right, we're now at 4K native and no upscaling on the Ultra preset, and detailed shadows are still on. I actually just want to see if detailed shadows make a difference at 4K, because at the lower resolutions it definitely did not. But you can see we are definitely not close to 60 frames per second here. I mean, the game looks absolutely fantastic at 4K, but performance wise, unless you're chasing that 24 frames per second cinematic experience, this is not going to go well, especially for a shooter. Right, firstly, let's just change the shadow option here. So 23 frames per second, and if we disable detailed shadows, still 24 frames per second. So that thing's not doing much. All right, well, we can just leave it on for now. So first, let's just drop it down to low, because let's see actually if medium makes a difference here. So still not. So the settings really don't scale well at all. So I guess low is our best bet here. Even low is not that great. Sure, I mean, we did get a 20% performance improvement going from 24 to 30 frames per second, but it's definitely still not playable. The frame time graph does seem to be a lot smoother now. Definitely not a VRAM issue, as we are still sitting under 6 gigabytes of VRAM, but let's just leave the preset on low and see what we need to do to get 60 frames per second here. Let's just try performance, the default setting the game starts you off with, and all right, there we go, got 60 frames per second. I don't think we'll maintain 60 frames per second at all times like there, but I think it's close enough, right? It's locked, okay, I was about to say locked 58 frames per second, but dropped down to 50 there. Once again, nothing against this GPU at all. Just testing 4K for the fun of it. I really don't expect it to run this well at all. Right, but still no 60 frames per second. Although this is not terrible. If this was my main system hooked up to a 4K monitor, I'd probably play it like this. The drops below 60, not really that terrible. And the game still looks pretty good. I think FSR is doing a pretty good job here. I haven't pixel peeped yet, but I really can't see that that much artifacting or shimmering. Like you can see there in the leaves. Maybe, I mean, that's very minimal. I'm really nitpicking here at the moment, but it does seem to look okay, even with the very aggressive upscaling settings. All right, let's see if Ultra Performance can actually get us that locked 60 frames per second. I'm guessing it would. Right, I mean, that's a pretty big jump, right? We are now getting 85 frames per second, but now you can see that it's definitely using aggressive upscaling. It still looks okay, but definitely nowhere near as sharp as even performance. Let's just go back to this area here. So I mean, definitely playable, and I'm guessing we stay above 60 frames per second. Maybe intense boss fights might drop it down to below 60 frames per second, but just running around in the world here. I'm actually actively looking for enemies. I'm not intentionally trying to make this as boring as it is at the moment. All right, here we go. So even in fighting, we're getting 90 frames per second here. I mean, sure, it's not a boss fight or a very intensive fight, but I mean, I'm actually quite surprised. Sure, I shouldn't be, because we are rendering internally at lower than 1080p. I think it's 720p on Ultra Performance, but still upscaling does have some overheads, and it's not going to perform the same as a 720p native. And you can make use of your 4K monitor without it looking blurry. For those of you who don't know, if you've got a 4K monitor and you set the resolution to 1440p or 1080p, it does become kind of blurry, just because of the way the pixels are arranged and laid out. So it's always best to try and keep a resolution to the native res and then try and upscale from a lower internal res, but the output should be your native resolution of the monitor. All right, but that's going to be it for this video. It's a little bit shorter just purely because there's not that many settings we can actually change. We can't toggle ray tracing or Lumen or nanite or any of the nice Unreal Engine 5 settings, but still a pretty enjoyable game for me so far. I've played it for around 6 hours now, and I kind of enjoyed it, and it looks good enough. All right, that's going to be it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and as always, we hope to see you in the next one.